All right, welcome everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty amazing, the making of Nezha2.
This Chinese animated film.
Yep, it's been making waves and we're going to really break it down, see what went on behind the scenes.
Sounds good.
We've got some excerpts from this document, basically like a sneak peek into the production process.
Cool.
Get this, the director, Nezha2, get this. He went from medical school to making movies.
Really?
Yeah, and the financial struggles they went through.
Wow.
And how this one film is practically turning the entire animation industry upside down.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that stood out to me the most, how one film, just one, can have such a massive impact on an entire industry.
Okay, so first let's talk about Nezha2, the director, right? I mean, picture this. You're studying medicine at West China Medical University.
One of the top schools?
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm going to make cartoons instead.
I mean, that's a pretty wild career change.
Right, but the thing is, it wasn't just some random idea he had. He'd already made this short film, Dashi Shir, and it won, get this, over 30 international awards.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Oh, and he spent 3 years making it all by himself on one computer.
Seriously, 3 years on a single computer? That's dedication right there.
Talk about commitment, right? So obviously, this guy has talent and drive. Like, you can just tell he's going places.
Absolutely, and that drive is what led him to create his own studio, Chengdu Coco Cartoon.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
They started small, just 13 people, most of whom had worked with Jiaozi before.
Really?
Yeah, and they all shared this vision, this idea of pushing the limits of what Chinese animation could be.
I can only imagine those early days, trying to get a studio off the ground.
It wasn't easy.
I read somewhere that they were working out of this tiny office using takeout boxes to store their files.
Haha, yeah, that's the kind of scrappy beginnings you hear about, the underdog story.
And to top it off, Jiaozi actually mortgaged his own house to fund Nezha1.
Wow, that's putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, talk about believing in your vision.
And the whole team was on board, too. They went 18 months without pay. They all agreed to share profits if the film did well.
That's a huge risk. So they went from this tiny team struggling to make ends meet to Nezha2, which sounds like this massive, epic production.
It really was. Nezha2 was a huge undertaking. They called it an industrial experiment, and I think that's a perfect way to describe it.
What do you mean by industrial experiment?
Well, think about it. 5 years of production, over 4,000 people involved, more than 20 different studios all working together.
That's mind-blowing. It's crazy to think it all started with a single script.
Well, that's where it all starts, right?
Right, but Jiaozi spent 2 years rewriting the script for Nezha2.
Really?
37 different versions. Can you imagine?
He was really searching for something specific with this story.
What do you think he was going for with all those rewrites?
From what I've read, he wanted to explore this idea of individual fate versus the will of the collective, a pretty big theme in Chinese philosophy.
It's pretty deep stuff for an animated film.
That's what makes it so interesting, though, right? It's not just your typical lighthearted cartoon. It's got these layers of meaning.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of layers, let's talk about those visuals.
Oh, yeah, the animation in Nezha2 is stunning.
There's this one fight scene between Nezha and Shen Gongbao, and they made over 2,400 storyboard sketches for it.
That's a lot of sketches.
And get this, 89 revisions, all for a 30-second sequence.
Wow, they weren't messing around.
Why do you think they put so much effort into just 30 seconds of film?
Well, in animation, every single frame matters. It's also deliberate, there's no room for error, and it's what makes Coco cartoons work so special.
So they're basically treating every frame like a work of art.
Exactly. And Jiaozi wasn't going to settle for anything less than perfect.
And speaking of perfection, how about those visual effects?
Oh man, the VFX in this film are next level.
There are 1,900 VFX shots in the whole film. 1,900. And that dragon armor scene, the one?
Yeah, I remember.
260 million particles and 72 hours of rendering time per frame.
That's insane.
I can't even imagine what went into creating something like that.
It was a huge challenge for them. They even tried outsourcing it to some big Hollywood studios at first.
Really? And what happened?
Well, there were some cultural misunderstandings, and the end result just wasn't what Jiaozi had envisioned.
So it was more than just about the technical skills, it was about capturing the essence of Chinese mythology.
Exactly. They needed a team who understood the cultural context.
So what did they do?
They brought in a Chinese VFX team, more VFX, the same folks who worked on The Wandering Earth, that massive sci-fi film.
Oh, wow. So they were the best of the best.
They spent 14 months recreating that dragon armor scene.
That's dedication.
It seems like that incredible dedication is kind of baked into Coco Cartoon's DNA, Their mottos are like, work ourselves to death, outcompete our peers, and animation is the religion of frames.
Wow, those are pretty hardcore. I mean, they're not afraid of hard work, that's for sure.
And it really shows in their attention to detail. They have this thing called Jiaozi's law, which basically means every character's expression has to pass the mask test.
The mask test. What's that?
So imagine covering the lower half of a character's face, right? You should still be able to understand their emotions just from their eyes.
Oh, wow. So even the subtlest expressions have to be clear.
Exactly. That's the level of detail they were aiming for.
It makes you wonder, how much time did they spend just figuring out the perfect expressions for each character?
I mean, we're talking days spent debating over single lines of dialogue, the sound recordist getting pneumonia while trying to capture real thunder for a storm sequence.
No way.
Oh, and get this, they made 217 color adjustments just to get the perfect shade for Ao Bing's pupils.
217 adjustments for pupils?
Yep.
That's insane, but it shows how much care and effort they put into every single detail.
It's that commitment to excellence that sets them apart, I think.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly dedicated team.
Yeah,
And Nezha2 is clearly deeply rooted in Chinese culture.
absolutely.
You see Taoist symbols, imagery from Dengwang murals, designs inspired by Sanxingdui bronze masks. It's like this incredible visual tapestry of Chinese art and history.
It's beautiful.
It's clear they weren't just trying to entertain, they wanted to showcase their heritage, spark conversations, make people think.
And they did. There were millions of views on platforms like Bilibili where people were dissecting all those cultural references, the hidden meanings.
But how did they make it work for international audiences? I mean, some of these concepts might be unfamiliar to people who didn't grow up with Chinese mythology.
Well, for the international release, Sony did a fantastic job bridging that cultural gap.
How so?
For example, they translated concepts like Hunhuanzhu into primordial chaos core, which resonates more with Western audiences.
So they made it more accessible without losing the original meaning.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, but they pulled it off.
All right, so we've talked about the story, the visuals, the cultural influences, but there's another key element to Nezha2's success, the technology.
Oh yeah, this film really showcases how advanced China has become in terms of animation technology.
Like what?
Well, they developed their own fluid simulation system 2.0 to create those epic flood scenes, and it increased efficiency by like 400%. They even filed 12 patents for that technology.
Wow, so they were pushing the boundaries on multiple fronts, creatively and technologically.
Exactly, and that's why Nezha2 was more than just a box office hit. It was a turning point for the entire Chinese animation industry. But before we get into that, I'm curious, what stood out to you so far about this whole story?
I think, honestly, it's the passion, the dedication of everyone involved that blows me away.
Yeah, it's contagious, isn't it?
It really is. It's like they poured their hearts and souls into this film.
And it paid off. I mean, Nezha2 completely changed the game for Chinese animation.
Right, like throwing a giant rock into a pond, the ripples are still spreading.
A great analogy.
You mentioned something about a capital flow reversal. What does that mean exactly?
So before Nezha2, a lot of investors, especially venture capitalists, they were hesitant to put money into Chinese animation.
Really? Why?
They saw it as too niche, maybe not as profitable as other genres.
But Nezha2 proved them wrong.
Big time. Suddenly, everyone wanted in on the action. Even Tencent, this massive tech company in China, they created a 5 billion yuan fund specifically for what they called 3A-level Chinese animation.
5 billion? That's a huge vote of confidence.
It's like saying, we believe in this industry, we're backing it up with serious cash.
It's not just about the money, though, is it? The document also mentions a brain drain happening across the industry. What was that all about?
Well, when you have a success story like Nezha2, it attracts talent like a magnet.
Yeah, makes sense.
Experienced animators, writers, visual effects artists, they all wanted to be a part of that winning team.
So people were actually leaving their jobs at established studios to join Coco Cartoon.
Yep, they were drawn to Jiaozi's vision, the chance to create something groundbreaking. A lot of them came from big studios like Original Force and October Culture.
It's like a seismic shift in the industry.
Exactly. The balance of power was changing.
And all because of one film. And that shift had a geographical impact too, right? Chengdu, where Coco Cartoon is based, it became this new hub for animation.
Absolutely. People started calling it China's third pole for animation after Beijing and Shanghai.
Wow, so Nezha2 brought talent, investment, and even put Chengdu on the map.
All of a sudden, it was the place to be if you were in animation.
That's incredible. So we see this ripple effect impacting finances, talent, even geography. It really shook things up.
It did, and there's one more thing we should touch on, international investment.
Oh, right. The document mentioned Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, PIF, I think it was?
Yeah, they acquired the overseas distribution rights for Nezha2. It was a big deal, the first time a Middle Eastern sovereign wealth fund invested in Chinese animation.
So Nezha2 wasn't just a domestic success story. It caught the attention of the whole world.
Exactly. It proved that Chinese animation has global appeal. It can connect with audiences across cultures.
Okay, so we've covered Zhaozi's journey, the crazy production process, the cultural influences, those technological innovations, and the massive impact on the animation industry. It's clear Nezha2 is a game changer.
No doubt about it.
But what does it all mean for our listener? What's the takeaway from all of this?
To me, it's the dedication of the Coco cartoon team, their mottos, their work ethic, their refusal to compromise. It's almost superhuman.
Yeah, work ourselves to death, outcompete our peers. That's pretty intense.
It is. But there's something inspiring about it, too, you know? They believe so strongly in their vision, they're willing to sacrifice everything to achieve it.
And they did. So are you saying that to succeed in any creative field, you need a level of obsessive dedication?
That's a good question. Is it a blueprint for success, or is this unique to animation? It probably depends on a lot of factors.
Like what?
Well, the individual, the project, the specific circumstances. But Nezha 2 definitely shows us the power of passion and perseverance. When you believe in something and you put in the work, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely. I mean, Jiaozi went from medical school dropout to an animation revolutionary.
It's an incredible story.
It really is, but it's more than just one person's story, right?
It's about a team, a studio, an entire industry finding its voice. Nezha 2 is a symbol of China's growing creative power, and it feels like we're just witnessing the beginning.
That's exciting. It makes me wonder if this kind of intense dedication, this Jiaozi's law approach, could work in other creative fields. Could we see that same level of meticulousness and passion in filmmaking, music production, even software development?
That's a really interesting thought.
Imagine, like, every musician obsessing over every single note the way Jiaozi obsessed over those peoples.
Or filmmakers arguing for days about one line of dialogue.
It could lead to some incredible masterpieces, but also maybe chaos.
Haha, maybe. That's what makes creativity so fascinating, though, right? There's no one right way to do it.
True, but Nezha 2 definitely shows what's possible when you push those boundaries.
Totally.
It could inspire a whole new generation of creators to really go all in on their passions.
I hope so. I think the world needs more passionate creators.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we have.
We talked about Jiaozi's crazy journey from med school to filmmaking, the insane production of Nezha 2.
All those cultural influences.
The technology, the impact on the animation industry. Nezha 2 wasn't just a movie, it was a moment.
That's a statement. Yeah. Chinese animation is here to stay.
And it's all thanks to the talent, the vision, the hard work of everyone involved.
And that sprinkle of obsession, right?
Definitely. I mean, it shows that even in a world where it seems like Hollywood rules everything, new voices, new stories can still break through.
Exactly. There's always room for something fresh, something different.
And sometimes those new voices come from the most unexpected places.
Like a medical school dropout?
Who would have thought?
It's pretty inspiring, isn't it?
It really is. It's all about that passion.
And following your dreams, no matter how crazy they seem.
Exactly. So to our listener, what are you passionate about? What are you willing to go all in for? What's in your Nezha 2?
That's the question, isn't it?
Keep pushing those boundaries. Keep believing in your vision.
Who knows? You might be the next Jiaozi, changing the world with your creativity.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the making of Nezha 2.
It's been fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning.
And keep those creative fires burning.